The M in crime stands for morality. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to visit the Buchenwald concentration camp. 68 years ago this month, the Allies liberated the camp. They went through the front gate, which is still there. They looked to the right, they saw the crematorium, which is still there. They got down to the crematorium, and then they looked into the courtyard attached to the crematorium, and this is what they saw. Brace yourself. Now, if there is no God, this is just a matter of opinion. Why? Because if there's no God, if there's no standard beyond humanity, then this is just your opinion against Hitler's opinion. If there's no standard beyond us, then we're just left with opinions. There are no objective moral rights or objective moral wrongs. In fact, if God does not exist, the Nazis were not wrong. It's just your opinion that they were wrong. If God does not exist, love is no better than rape. Not in an objective way, anyway. You just may not like it. It's just unfashionable, perhaps, but it's not really wrong. If God does not exist, blowing up innocent people watching a marathon is morally no different than feeding the poor. It's just your opinion. If God does not exist, religious crusades are not wrong. I had the opportunity to debate Christopher Hitchens a couple times. I love Christopher Hitchens. He was great. We had a lot of fun. He had a British accent, so he sounded even more brilliant than he was. And you could see both our debates on our website, crossexamined.org, for free. And Hitchens kept talking about all the evil religious people were doing in the Crusades. I say, Christopher, I agree with you. Exactly. But you know what? There's nothing wrong with that if there's no God. Because there's no standard of righteousness. If there's no standard of righteousness, nothing can be unrighteous. In fact, tolerance is no better than intolerance. David, with his organization, rightfully fights for tolerance for atheists. But look, if there's no God, why tolerate anything? Because there is no, in fact, there are no human rights if there is no God. Everything is a matter of opinion. If we're just overgrown germs that got here by some evolutionary process, then we're no different than any other animal. There is no objective morality if there is no God. Now, by the way, I didn't say atheists weren't good people. I didn't say atheists couldn't know morality. What I'm saying here is atheists can't justify morality. Now, let me move on to evil. You're going, wait, he's supposed to bring that up. Evil's an argument against God. Actually, let's take a look at it a little bit more closely. In fact, let's draw a two-column chart here. Does God exist? Yes and no. I've just given some of the evidence that God does exist. Creation, design of the universe, reason, which include the laws of logic, information, and morality. Let me add a couple more. I briefly mentioned free will. We have free will. That can't be explained in an atheistic worldview, because if we're just molecules in motion, we really don't have freedom. We're not really making choices. We're just reacting to previous physical causes. The laws of nature. You ever wonder why the laws of nature are so precise? Why can we take a rover and put it on Mars with absolute precision? Who's holding this universe together? Why are the four fundamental forces so predictable and so precise? It seems like something's holding this all together right now. In fact, as you know, the Christian view of God is not just that he created the universe, but he's sustaining it right now. In fact, this is Aristotle's view. Somebody's holding the universe together right now. God is to the universe as a symphony is to music. Once the symphony stops playing, the music's over. Somebody's holding the universe together right now. Now, on the other side, you'd say evil. If there is a good God, why is all this evil in the world? Well, it turns out that evil is not an argument against God. Evil actually turns out to be an argument for God. Why? Because objective evil presupposes objective good, and objective good requires God. In fact, C.S. Lewis, who was an atheist for a period of time because he thought the world was too unjust, realized that didn't make any sense. Here's what he wrote in Mere Christianity after he became a Christian. He said, as an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called it unjust? There's no such thing as injustice unless there's such a thing as justice, and there's no such thing as justice unless there's a standard outside of ourselves that's objective and doesn't change. In fact, we could say it this way. The shadows prove the sunshine. In order to have shadows, you have to have sunshine. In order to have evil, you have to have good. Oh, you can have good without evil. You can have sunshine without shadows, but you can't have evil without good. You can't have shadows without sunshine. So let's adjust our chart. Actually, I think evil we can actually put on the yes side of the ledger. Now, this doesn't explain everything about evil, quite obviously, but the whole idea that there is evil points to good, and good only exists if God exists. Now, the S, science, he's going to bring up science. Actually, no, science does not help the atheists. In fact, science can't be done if atheism is true. In fact, Einstein asked an interesting question. To why can we do science? Here's what Einstein said. The most incomprehensible thing about the world is that it is at all comprehensible. Why is the world comprehensible? Why can we appropriate knowledge about the world and then draw conclusions about the world? Only if theism is true, or at least some immaterial reality is true, can we even do science. Because science is built on a foundation of immaterial realities that theism, not atheism, can explain. In fact, here are many things that atheism can explain but are required to do science. Orderly natural laws, we already talked about that. The law of causality. You can't prove the law of causality by doing a science experiment. You have to assume the law of causality in order to do a science experiment. That's what science does. It looks for causes. The laws of logic that we're using right now to even understand one another. You can't prove them by science. You have to assume them in order to do science. Reason, the ability to reason, we've already talked about that. Free will, we've talked about that. You got to be able to freely evaluate the data and come to a conclusion, because science doesn't say anything, scientists do. Also, realism, that's the idea that we can appropriate through our senses truth about the real world and then draw conclusions from it. Well, that requires having free will, having reason, having these laws of logic. These are all immaterial realities that don't exist if just a material view of the world, i.e. atheism, is true. Finally, morality. We can't even trust scientists unless they're ethical and tell us the results of their experiments truthfully and honestly. You can't prove that by science. You have to assume the scientists are ethical. You can't put honesty in a test tube. All of these things right here are immaterial realities that can't exist if atheism's true. So science isn't a friend of atheism. In fact, it's quite often thought that Christianity or theism's at war with science. Atheism is at war with science, because you can't do science if atheism's true. Now, reality is better explained by crimes. Cosmos, reason, information, morality, evil, and science. There are other arguments as well, but I'm running out of time. In fact, let's just take these first four and draw some conclusions about the first cause. From these four aspects of reality, we can reason from effect to cause to learn that God has certain attributes. We're reasoning from effect to cause. We have an effect, we try and figure out what the cause is. From the cosmos, we can see that this being is immaterial, timeless, and spaceless. Why? Because he created material, time, and space. We can also see this is extremely powerful because he created out of nothing. Do you realize every time we create something, we create out of pre-existing material? God creates out of nothing. What is nothing? Aristotle had a good definition of nothing. He said nothing is what rocks dream about. That's nothing. No space, no matter, no time. From reason, we know that this being is rational, and we can trust our reason then because it ultimately comes from him, not some mindless process. From information or design, we can see that this being is extremely intelligent. He has purpose. From the moral argument, we can see he's absolutely morally perfect, and he's also personal. How do we know he's personal from the moral argument? Because you only have a moral obligation to personal forces. You don't, or to personal forces, you don't have a moral obligation to impersonal forces. When you go try and dunk a basketball, you're not sinning against the law of gravity. We also know he's personal from the cosmological argument, or from the cosmos. Why? Because in order to go from a state of nothingness to a state of existence, someone had to make a choice. And only persons make choices. Gravity doesn't decide to do anything. Gravity doesn't say, look, if he drops that remote one more time, I'm not going to pull it or push it to the ground, right? Gravity does the same thing over and over again, but to go from a state of nothingness to a state of existence, someone had to make a choice. Now notice we have an immaterial, timeless, spaceless, extremely powerful, rational, extremely intelligent, purposeful, morally perfect, personal creator. This is a theistic God identified without reference to any religious book. Now this is not the invisible man in the sky. This is an unlimited cause of all being, including the sky and everything else that exists. This is the unmoved mover of Aristotle and consistent with the Yahweh of the Jews and the Christians, who not only caused all things, but holds them together right now. In conclusion, none of these things can be explained by atheism, but they can be explained by theism. In fact, all of these aspects of reality have an immaterial source or foundation. Therefore, when atheists use or cite any of them to support atheism, they are stealing from God in order to argue against him. And you know, stealing is a crime. So if David starts bringing up science or starts bringing up reasons or starts bringing up, I hope he's bringing up reasons, it's a debate, or starts bringing up evil, these things don't exist if atheism's true. So let's see how he handles it. But these are the reasons, among others, I don't have enough faith to be an atheist.